And we are live. You are with Rain and Stefan, and this is unprecedented. Welcome to our podcast. This is our third episode. Can you believe it, Rain?
Well, it just has flown. It's been amazing thus far, and we
I
just have
know.
so much to share. And boy, when we get talking, we could probably go on for hours.
We really could. I think that we have to kind of keep watching the clock because it just runs away with us. But
Exactly.
today we're going to try and keep it short and sweet-ish. And our topic, I think, is going to be a really interesting one and a great follow-on from our last two topics. Today is birth, creativity, and the necessity of expansion. So this is quite an interesting one, don't you think, Rain?
Well, it certainly sounds like a loaded gun, but
It
in a
does
good way. But in a good
absolutely.
way.
Yeah. And I love the fact that, all the topic today could be taken in so many different ways. The
Oh,
first thing.
absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. You think the first thing that comes to mind is, well, birth, obviously that's when you're born, but no,
Hmm.
we actually go through so many rebirths throughout our lives that it's this constant cycle that we really go through. And that was something that was playing on my mind this whole week as we were prepping for today. I don't know about you. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I felt the same way. Birth right away, I think our reptilian brain goes to, oh, the birth of, you picture a baby
Mm,
and you picture, being born into the world. But I think you're correct on this that, then my next thoughts went to, but wait a minute, we are reborn all the time. So our thoughts go to more of a rebirth, a rebirthing.
mm,
And my thoughts followed into, what does that rebirthing mean? We know that we try different things, we are brought into different experiences, we are introduced to new people in our lives and new ways of looking at things like perspectives. But one thing that really stood out to me was rebirth towards the resurrection of consciousness.
ooh,
Isn't that interesting? And I thought,
mm,
why resurrection? Because that's what came to me. And I believe that it's resurrection because we, in our humanness, forget. We forget where or whence we came from. We are born into this world, and so many light workers will could speak to this, that we come from the universal realms of existence. And whether we believe we're sitting at God's feet and we're doing due diligence for humanity in that way, or that we're residing on other planets and in the
mm,
hemispheres, and that's where we come from, which of course are all facets of source. But when we come into the earth, when we're born, when we choose our human family, we come in and we completely forget everything.
right.
Have you heard this concept before?
I have indeed, yes. And it's one that irks me no end because it's one I believe in, but I hate the
Hmm.
thought that I can't remember like what went before.
And I think why we get so frustrated with it is because we want to remember, like you said, we want to, at some point or many points in our lives. Like I can remember when I was probably in my 20s,
Mm-hmm.
and my children and my husband and I were at a gathering with friends, and I don't know what was going on with me. I know that I had been going through a lot of transitions, as most of us do in our 20s.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very transitional period at different points. And I just remember just this feeling of there's got to be something more to this life than what we're doing, this working hard, this um, trying to get somewhere, trying to understand. It just always felt like this grinding wheel, like where are we
Right.
going? And, what is the purpose and the meaning and that sort of thing. And so I did have an experience where I just at one point just fell to my knees and just spoke to God's source and just laid it out. And so they were very transitional times for me, and I believe that they are for most of us. And this is what piqued my interest, so to speak, and was bringing me into the consciousness piece that is so important in our evolution.
Now, it's so interesting that you say that because I had kind of a similar experience, but mine was when I was a lot younger and I definitely repressed it. The sensations. Because I remember as a child when I remember clearly there was one church meeting where, and the religion I belonged to believed that you would only some people would go to heaven, but a lot of people would go to another earth that would be where we would live eternally and have eternal health and all the rest of it.
Right.
And
Well, isn't that interesting? Because that's what's happening right now.
right, exactly, yeah.
That's so interesting.
And I remember the question was posed, who really wants to go to heaven? And everybody was like, well, no, we don't really want to, because what would we do there? And I remember clearly, I could have been older than 4 or 5, putting my hand up. And my mother was like, what are you doing? Like, don't you want to be here with us and, be able to play with your friends and have beautiful health? And I'm like, and I looked at her with this quizzical expression, like, no, that sounds awful. I don't want to do that. And she asked me the next day, she's like, why did you say that? And I couldn't really express myself. I didn't have the vocabulary to do so.
Yes.
And looking back, I just remember feeling intense frustration. And when I have the vocabulary and I can figure out what was going on, I vividly remember that the reason I was so frustrated was because being here felt too dense.
Right.
So first thing was my body was too small. And I knew instinctively that, because I would say that to my mother, like, why are my legs so short? Why am I so small? And my mother said, well, you're going to grow. But I knew instinctively that even at adult height, my body would still be too small for me. Because for me, and I still get this feeling every so now and then, like if I'm walking anywhere, every so now and then I'll get this flash of frustration because I'm like, why am I not just there? Like air travel to me seems like the most mundane thing you could possibly do. I don't get it. To me, you should just be able to think and you're there.
Yes.
And that was when I was a child, that feeling was a lot stronger. And I even remember lying on the couch one day. Again, I couldn't have been more than a toddler. And my mother goes, what are you doing? Are you daydreaming? And I just said yes. But the memory that I have was I was seeing things that were memories that I couldn't possibly have had.
Right. Now, these memories were from what? From where?
So those were what I call the in-between times.
Okay.
Because I do have memories now of past lives, and I don't have memories of the in-between times. But when I was a child, I very much had these memories of those in-between times.
Right.
The space between lives.
Yes. So Fisher wrote a book on that. I can't recall his
Right.
first name right now, but he wrote a book called Life Between Life.
Oh.
And so that's, you were having flashbacks actually of, to remember that clearly. And what we can look at is the fact that, you were a toddler still, and that's very common among children up until about the age of 5, because children will still remember where they came from, their past lives or the life between life. But again, a lot of us have those flashes perhaps, but I don't recall any myself. But again, we aren't fully present in our bodies. And this is why we it's almost like, when someone is elderly and they're in the hospital and they seem like they're slipping in and out of consciousness.
Yes.
They're visiting the other world, and often they'll talk about they see their husband that's passed away, or their parents, or they see people that have gone on to the other world, because they're coming and they're visiting them, and so their spirit is slipping into the other world. So
Yes.
they'll often say they have one foot in, each side of the world. So this is quite interesting, because for you to remember that, and to have those recollections at that age is very telling.
And I
Uh,
even remember what I was doing
wow.
in these between lives, but
Right.
it's something I've only, I think, shared with one or two other people, because when I say it, it sounds so interminably boring as a task, but yet I know that I really enjoyed it. My
Mhm.
job was to watch and observe a cluster of stars.
Okay.
That was
I,
just my entire role. And I don't know why that was important, but I remember that I really enjoyed it.
that's really intriguing, because I've been watching some of Dolores Cannon again lately,
Mm-hmm.
and she talks about sessions that she's had. She does hypnotherapy, and she's now passed away, I think 2 or 3 years ago, but she did sessions for 30, 40 years with people, and they described, or there were channelers that came through them, speaking about other worlds. And so some of what you're talking about is very relevant to what, the way
Mm.
she was explaining. And she's written like 30 books, I believe. But what I really find interesting is that you remembered.
Mm.
And if you have those recollections again, it would be really great to document them, right? And
I'd
put
love it
them
if I
down.
could. I'd
Yeah.
love it if I could. I ask myself every night, like, can you please remember some more things? Because
Yes.
when I was a child, it felt like it just would come to me naturally. And
Right.
now it's like there's this block, this wall up. And I actually say, and hopefully this kind of brings us back to our topic around necessity of expansion and whatnot. One of the topics, I don't know if this is a conversation that you've ever had or if it's maybe a bit morbid, but a lot of my friends would say, when do you think would be a good time to kind of shuffle off the mortal coil?
Hmm.
And my answer is always 750. And they're like, well, why do you want to live so long? And okay, it's twofold. One, because I've started to learn to enjoy the physical and I really like it. And
Hmm.
I feel like 80 to 100 years is just too short to enjoy it. And I'd really like a little bit longer time, which science is now finally catching up to. And they think it's possible to extend human life to that extent, with health and wellness and all the rest of being part of that parcel. But the other reason is because I've been studying a lot around the Ascended Masters. And it's interesting that every single story you read, whether it's in Christianity or in Egyptian mythology or in Hinduism, all of these ascended masters go through this birth, death, resurrection, this expansion of soul. And what's interesting is they are often able to retake physical form, but they don't lose their memories.
Mm.
And they essentially break that cycle of death and rebirth where they're able to flit in and out of this matrix
Right.
into the other and essentially do as they please. So the other reason why I want to live that long is because I'd really like to be able to do that so that I can keep my
Right.
memories intact.
Well, some things have been being given to me as, in my meditative state or my
Mm,
dreams and that sort of thing. The full picture hasn't been given to me completely yet. Of course, there's still lots of room for, like, here we are with our word expansion. So there's
right.
still lots of room for growth and understanding. And, we're all at different levels, as we've talked about before, different levels of growth and expansion. And there may be some intuitives out there that have been given more and some less. But I think you're onto something here in the sense of we definitely are in a space, or if you want to call it a role as an individual, as individuals and as a collective consciousness at this
Mm-hmm.
time, because we are evolving and we are expanding.
Yes.
And it is necessary because change needs to happen now. And
Right.
this is why we're going through so much. We're going through the difficulties, we're going through the trials, we're going through, as you know, scripture talks about the trials and tribulations.
Mm.
And often, one thing that we can probably recognize is that often chaos needs to happen before order can come in, before
Yes.
change can come in. And
Yes.
so when we're talking about, you know, the creativity that's happening in science, because creativity is, we are creative as individuals. And when we say that, we're creative, maybe, you know, in, of course, in art and in music, and we may be creative in, you know, putting words on a paper. There's many ways that we can be creative, but you make the point that science is evolving and we are,
Mm.
it's quickening. It's actually, and I'm sure there's lots that we don't even know that it is being worked on behind the scenes and
Oh,
that sort of thing.
absolutely.
Um, you know, I think one thing that we just need to be cautious about is the fact that it's kind of like what you and I were talking about in our conversation earlier, is
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes when we expand our minds, because we're expanding our minds through um, meditation and through
Mm-hmm.
information, and we're expanding our emotions are growing with that. But sometimes what happens is that our body needs that time to catch up.
Right.
So often, you know, the spirit and the mind and the emotions are like a mile ahead of us, and the body is, because the body is so dense, it's so heavy, and it needs that time to catch up. And this
Mm.
is this is why and how Earth is changing now, because we are that dense planet that isn't where a lot of the other planets are in their spiritual evolution,
Yes.
right? So they are, I can just see them right now. Many angels and spirits are, it's like they've got their hands out and they're pulling the earth up. Literally, I can see
Right.
it visually. And it's so interesting because they are encouraging us, they are supporting us. And I think, though, what we have to be cautious of is when we're talking about science, is that we don't take that God piece out, that we don't take that
Yes.
soul composition out, because that is really what makes us so unique and authentic in who we are and what we have to
Absolutely.
contribute, you know?
So you've said some beautiful things there that I'd like to just elaborate on, if I may. One
Please do.
was, you were talking about creativity and in science and the things that are being worked on, etc. And I'm noticing just from talking to a few of my friends who are highly into tech, but at the same time with a spiritual bend. And when I talk to them, their take on things is that science is becoming more spiritual. So one of the things that just blew my mind, because I was like, hang on, that's what happens when I use what people would call psychic ability. Because I don't know if you've heard of quantum computers. So what's happened in tech now is so there was this thing called Planck's law, which basically says that our computing power would double each year as we progressed in our technological capability.
Mm,
As of last year, we reached the ceiling of Planck's law. So what that meant was computer chips could not get any smaller. If they did, or if they do, the particles that they're trying to use to create the computing power, because I'm using very layman's terms because I don't quite understand what they do myself.
okay.
But essentially, what was happening is when they made these chips smaller than the smallest one they have, the particles were leaking out because the chip was too
Mm,
small. So the level of computing power had reached its limit. It couldn't go any higher. So they started looking at quantum computing. And quantum computers now are able to solve a problem in, let's say, 1 hour that would take the fastest computer on the planet 5 years to complete.
Gee.
But here's the kicker. The scientists who are building this don't know what is happening. They know what's happening, but they can't tell you exactly what the steps are. So
They don't know how it's happening.
exactly. So the one scientist that was interviewed, and I'd love to find that YouTube video again and just share it with a couple of people, yourself included. But he was interviewed and he said essentially what happens is the particle inside this quantum chip disappears from this reality as we know it. We know it's gone. It's gone. It hasn't moved in the room or anything like that. It flits out of this universe as we know it. It goes into the quantum realm, which we can't see. We don't know where that is or where it goes once it gets to the quantum realm. All we know is that when it comes back, it has the information that we needed it to get. And I was like, that's how my what you would call psychic ability works. Because people ask me like, where do your visions come from? And I'm like, no idea. I just know that I ask, I meditate, and then something will come in, and it's the answer that I need.
That's right.
And that's how it works. So essentially, I'm like, so basically, the human brain is the most powerful quantum computer on the planet. It's just also the most underutilized one. And now science is catching up to that and going, well, here's the scientific aspect of what you're doing, which when combined with spirituality, I just think is it's the height of creativity and creative expression. Because I do believe
Yes.
that math is I mean, as much as I am the worst mathematician out there, I do believe that it is the building blocks of the reality in which we live.
Right.
Um,
Numbers are
they're everywhere.
crucial to the whole structure of the matrix, if you want to call it that. What's interesting about that perspective, a lot of people talk about, oh, we live on Earth and we've got to get out of the matrix because, we're in this forced matrix that is,
Yeah.
limiting us and that sort of thing. And what's interesting is when I was writing my book, God showed me clearly that the matrix, rather than destroying a structure and
Mm-hmm.
tearing it down, he actually showed me the matrix expanding. So it was like it
Right.
expanded from the earth all the way out into the universal hemisphere. It was like it was never ending. It was just like this grid pattern that just like completely embellished across the universal hemisphere and earth, and it was all interconnected, which really made sense to me. And it actually connects with what you're saying, because
Mm-hmm.
this is huge. Like, the fact that science is catching up, and I'm sure we could probably, if we did some research on it, and find like all of the interconnecting pieces to that whole composition, right? Like you say, with the whole spiritual understanding and expansion.
Right. Exactly. And sorry, you just said something so amazing there about this matrix and how it expands out. And it's really about, it's not about tearing down this matrix. And I think that's something that people really need to recognize. You know,
Hmm.
it's because I have this discussion with one of my friends who he's a devout Christian, and but his whole goal is, he basically believes that the physical world is just essentially evil. Yeah, he basically believes it's evil. And I said, well, no, it can't be evil because if you go back to scripture, the angels themselves wanted to come here to experience fleshly delights. So, and God created and pronounced it good. So it can't be evil. It is good. It serves a purpose. It's just that somewhere along the line, it became more dense than it should have been. And there
Hmm.
really needs to be this upliftment. And I think, I mean, you mentioned talking about you have this vision of angels literally reaching out and dragging the earthly realm up into another
Yes.
dimension. And I almost wonder if when we now talk about scientists doing their work and also light workers doing their work and shadow workers doing theirs, if that's not us getting behind the planet and pushing it whilst the angels are trying to pull it up, to try and get this planet up to the next, everybody's doing their part to get it
Right, right.
to the next
Well,
level.
we're all preparing to move there, even, if people are not yet aware or
Yes.
awakened, they're still playing a role in it. So, the whole adage, like, we have nemesis in our lives
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, create conflict for us, or let's just leave it at that. They create conflict for us, or we them, and it's seen as, you're the enemy, almost like that mentality of, like you say, your friend was speaking about, the earth is evil. There is both evil and good. There's both good
Mm,
and bad. There's both light and dark. We need both. Abraham Hicks talks about, contrast. We need that contrast. If we
right.
don't know, if something isn't is good, if we don't know if something isn't good for us, how can we weigh what is good for us if we don't have something to weigh against, and that sort of thing. If we haven't had a relationship that was not very healthy, or was not suitable for us, whatever the case may be, then how can we recognize when one comes along that's amazingly fantastic and beautiful? And
Exactly.
that doesn't have to be the plumb line. I mean, not everyone has to go through that. Sometimes they
Oh,
meet the
sure.
love of their life at 15 and they're with them for, 50 years, and yay to them. We probably all wish we could be those people, but we do need to go through experiences and growth, and we do need to have contrast in order to sometimes see the other side of things. Now,
Absolutely.
it doesn't mean that, again, you made a really good point about everyone has value, and it is, I think, hard for us to wrap our brain around, our cerebral brain around, why would it be okay for someone, for example, to break into your house and steal all of your things, and or your valuables, and now you are, now you've got some PTSD and you're
Mm,
missing your items and all those sorts of things. So why would God, or why would Source love someone like that? It's because
mm.
God loves all. God loves all. I've listened to, not, this isn't even on, in religious terms. I've listened to many pods about people who have studied the relevance of, let's say, dark entities or
Mm,
spirits, and why are they permitted? Why are they allowed to infiltrate and to affect us? And, the summation there was that God loves all, and we are all evolving. And sometimes we are challenged by dark experiences. We could just summarize them
mm-hmm.
like that, in order to propel us into growth as well.
Absolutely. And this now comes back to your other comment about the scriptures talking about there being tribulations. And I think it's Revelation that talks about a great tribulation that would precede this era of light and enlightenment that is supposed
Mhm.
to come to the planet. And I do think, well, first of all, I think it's started already, um,
Oh,
because
and we've been experiencing trials and tribulations, the whole
hugely,
time, we've been
exactly,
on earth, right? So
that's
in
it.
different ways.
But now I think like it's definitely gotten. Well, I mean, the scripture says it would be something that mankind has never seen before, no, nor will see again.
Exactly.
And I'm looking around and I'm going, I think it started, guys. Like I think this is it
Yeah. Well, let's go
because.
back.
Mm,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no,
Go
no, no,
ahead,
please.
finish your thought. Let's go back to almost 2 summers now. And I
Mm-hmm.
was relocating back to my home, and the whole drive here, God and my guides just kept saying to me, something is about to happen that has never happened before in the entire history of the world. And they just kept on impressing this, you know, piece that was coming, and I had no idea what they were talking about. They weren't giving me any more information, and this went on, like I say, the whole drive here. It's an 8-hour drive, and
Mm-hmm.
then it continued to peek in and to remind me over and over again. And then come, fast forward to March 2019. Um, was it 2019? Yeah, that's, I
Mm-hmm.
guess, when all of this started, the whole virus and
Yeah,
the
it was December
lockdowns. And
2019 that it started. Yeah.
right. And so all of a sudden, well, then it would have been March 2020 then. That's when
Okay.
it, yeah. So for us in Canada, that's when we started hearing news. I know it kind of started in January in some areas of the world. And all of a sudden, I just had this, this feeling now, oh, okay, now this is what I was being, told.
Mm,
But isn't that interesting? I wasn't given any more information. And, I guess maybe God just wanted me to know, in a sense, don't worry. It's kind of basically what you're saying. Don't worry.
yes.
We are going through, these trials and tribulations, but don't worry. You know, everything's going to be okay and everything will be as it should, even despite all of the pain and the suffering and
Mm,
everything that, people are going through. It's part of that whole evolutionary process, and it is part of the birth of our new world that is coming,
right.
and these are all the creative aspects in that we are all contributing to in different ways, whether good, bad, or indifferent.
Absolutely. And, you say that right now, and something came to me quite strongly about how we can all contribute as well. Because the last week or so, I've been, I want to say, frustrated, angry, really depressed, and sad at the same time.
Hmm.
Because I've been doing something which I told myself I would never do, which is watch the news. And I've been doing it every morning.
Okay. Oh no. Oh, that's difficult
Uh,
because I get a few pieces of it. I don't watch mainstream news either, and I get a few pieces of it from, people that share on social
mm,
media, and I'm like, wow, this is like, it inoculates you in a way that just like paralyzes you, right?
exactly. And I've been watching this and I've been horrified at the depth of depravity that humankind is able to go to. And I mean, a lot of my friends know that I vacillate between love for all humans and then just going, oh, you know what? Let's God actually just you missed eight when you did the flood. Like seriously, because this is not it.
Mhm.
But now, like today, something when I switched on the news very briefly, and I saw just the horrific crimes that have been committed in Mexico.
Mhm.
And this is not just on the heels of everything that's happened in the Gaza Strip, and of course everything that's happening in Eritrea, and then you look at what's going on in Myanmar, and it's just like one huge humanitarian disaster and atrocity
Mhm.
after another. And
Right.
I look at this and I'm like, this is just awful. But then when you said that now about, we all need to do our part, something literally just tapped me on the shoulder and went, that's why you've been watching the news. Because
Mhm.
more of the light workers and shadow workers need to look at this and go, never again.
Well, and I think what's happened, if you look across the world, there are some thought leaders that have come forward, and I think we're ever so grateful to those leaders that have, stepped up to the challenge throughout this whole, uh, right now we're looking at about 16 months, and there are
Mm,
many, 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 millions, billions of people that basically, I was just saying the other day, where did all the artists go? Like, where did all the musicians go? Where did all of the psychics go? It's almost as if everyone just like disappeared off the
mm,
planet. And it's like everybody just sort of like took a back seat. And when I say everybody, I don't mean everyone. Let's say a lot of people, the majority of people just, went into their homes, shut their doors, because it is overwhelming and it can
mm,
be overwhelming. But I think, you really, you know, hit upon an important part of it, is that there are different periods of time where we are called. So
Yes.
perhaps you weren't called to do anything 6 months ago, but now your spirit is calling you to contribute somehow. And part of that piece is, yes, we do need to know and be privy to what is going on in a, you know, in a negative, whatever is of a negative nature, because we need
Mm-hmm.
to know to a certain degree what is going on, even though as empathic people, it does hurt our spirits. It does
Yeah.
literally hurt our hearts and our souls to see people suffering. But on the other end of it, it helps to educate us to the degree that, okay, now we can, what can we do to contribute to raise the vibration? What can we
Exactly.
do to make things better, not only for ourselves, but for the whole world as a collective? You
For
know,
sure. And that is you've said something so beautiful there because and this is probably why I vacillate between the two extremes in my own mind so often is because I forget that if you raise your vibration in yourself, and I've seen this just in my own home, if you raise the vibration in yourself, it automatically has a knock-on effect. Just like when you go and hang out with
yes.
someone who's really negative, you're suddenly
Hmm.
depressed and angry and you have no idea why. It's because of that person.
That's right.
But
That's
if you're
right.
hyper positive, not hyper positive, but if you have a high vibrational energy, you automatically start to change the very air around you.
Yes.
And then that
And
has a knock on effect.
so on that note, I believe we need to jump off here at this point. But on that note, let's leave our listeners with some positive tips to being able to bring ourselves into that realm of higher vibration, because we're all in this boat together, and we will have moments where we struggle. So what can we do? And I would just like to contribute at this point,
Please.
and then perhaps you can share, Stefan, some of the things that you might suggest. And so one would be definitely to surround, like you say, surround yourself with as many positive people as you can. So that doesn't mean that you don't have people or information that is of a negative nature that comes in to gather that information, but surround yourself with supportive, loving people in your life. Have
Mm-hmm.
conversations with them, you know, throughout the day to help each other, to help pull each other up off of your knees when you're feeling like you're just
Right.
overwhelmed. The other piece of it would be, you know, listen to podcasts that are positive, listen to
Mm.
music that's positive. It could be secular music, it could be Christian music, it could be the Hertz videos that we, you know, listen to raise our vibration.
Mm.
You can put those on at night, you know, with your headphones on, you know, as you're going off to sleep, or in the
Right.
morning when you get up. You know, leave it on for as long as you need to. If that's 2, 3 hours, then by all means do
Yeah.
that. And then another piece of that would be, you know, self-care. So, you know,
Mm.
take that time to pause, go make yourself a cup of tea or coffee, and just stand there and just feel it in that present moment, going into your body and feeling the nurturing of that, you know, cup of tea going into you. And then finally, I'll leave our listeners with, go outside by
Oh,
all
yes.
means. Ground yourself. Go out now. It's nice. We're not in the middle of winter anymore. We can go out with, you know, take our shoes off, walk on the grass in our bare feet,
Mm.
you know, sit on the earth and feel the sun on your face, and just absorb that positive energy so that it inspires you and it lifts you up.
For sure. I'm going to add just one thing to that and then a last experience, which I hope helps to raise the vibration as well of everybody listening to this. And the one thing that I've found that definitely raises my vibration is I wake up every morning and I tell myself, I'm going to have fun today. Every piece of work I do today, I'm going to enjoy it. And if there's anything that I really don't enjoy, well, I'm going to find a way to make it enjoyable. So if it's an admin task that I really don't feel like doing, well, I'm going to blast music that I absolutely love to listen to whilst I do it. So therefore, it becomes fun. And when I've given this advice to other people, I haven't changed anything that they're doing in their day. It's just a perspective change. And they
Mhm.
suddenly say they feel lighter because they're going in with the conscious expectation that they're going to enjoy their time whilst they're awake. And
Absolutely.
it's just beautiful. And then the experience I want to share, just for anybody who's feeling alone and feeling like I often do, where it's just like, what is the point of even trying? I was on Instagram, and it was I've been trying to think of her name for the past 5 minutes, and it's just come to me. If you on Instagram, please look her up. It's Lori Ladd. That's Lorie, and then new word Ladd. And she's an incredible intuitive. And the one video that I saw, she said she had this same thing where she just felt like, what is the point? I'm trying to do all this work and it's just not, I'm not having an impact because look at how much negative stuff is still out there in the
Hmm.
world.
Right.
And her guides came to her and took her to look at the planets. And they said, we don't do this often, but you asked, and I'm getting emotional now because it was just such a beautiful image that she described. And they said, look at the planet. Now we're going to show you all the negative people and the negativity that's in the world. And she said, and she saw these like black holes, like lights, but they were dark, flashing across the planet. And she's like, this is it. This is why I have such an issue. And they said, wait, now we're going to show you all the light workers. And she said the whole planet lit up like a beacon.
Wow.
And they looked at her and they said, there are so many of you doing this incredible work. Don't you dare
Mhm.
stop.
That's right. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that,
Oh,
Stefan.
it's
And
a pleasure.
I am familiar with Lori Ladd, and I haven't
Uh-huh.
seen that episode, so I definitely will have to look that one up because it is so,
Please do.
so encouraging.
Yeah, just amazing. Just amazing. Rain, as always, incredible talking with you. Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. And to
And
all our
thank you,
listeners,
Stefan.
thank you so much for being with us and thank you. And that brings our episode for today to an end. This has been Unprecedented with Rain and Stefan.